For more insight, we turn to Barbara Slavin. She's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a foreign policy analyst. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. You know, some might consider this a win for diplomacy because in the past we had a handful of U.S. lawmakers pushing for a military strike on Iran to force this type of agreement to happen. So how did we get to this point?
Well, it's a really long story, but you know, the Obama administration has been interested in a diplomatic deal with Iran, I think since it came into office back in 2009. But we had a government in Iran that was led by President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was a little difficult for a lot of people to stomach. What I think has changed the dynamic has been the election in Iran that brought a new president, Hassan Rouhani, and a new negotiating team. Also, frankly, the sanctions that were put in place by Congress created an atmosphere where Iran had a real incentive to come to the table and be prepared to negotiate seriously.
By all accounts, Israel has been the leading voice against this type of deal. Not very happy right now. And as we heard in Nathan's story, some new comments from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterating that point. So by agreeing to this deal, has the United States damaged its relationship with Israel?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think Israel would be one of the biggest beneficiaries if this deal holds. Now, we have to remind people this is an interim agreement. There are still negotiations on a more comprehensive deal to come. But even the interim agreement stops Iran from enriching uranium to the point where it could be used in a weapon. So that protects Israel. It protects the Arab states across the Persian Gulf. It's good for all of them. Now, there may be a certain lack of trust on the part of the Israelis. There's a certain lack of trust on the part of the Americans and the Iranians, frankly, whether everyone will abide by this deal. But we're going to have extraordinary inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, access to Iran's nuclear program that we've never had before. So I think it's certainly worth allowing 5, 6, 7 months to see if this deal can be finalized.
And as you can imagine, there's been a lot of focus on the nuclear part of this deal, but easing billions of dollars in sanctions is obviously huge for Iran as well, and it's been struggling financially over the past years. I want you to listen in to what an analyst at the Gulf Research Center said recently and get your reaction on the other side. Sure.
Iran will be stronger after lifting some of the sanctions and will have a different role in the region than before. Iran is right now losing about $60 billion a year because of the sanctions. These amounts have great importance for Iran, but there are other factors which will determine the future of Iran in the region, not just the nuclear issue.
So assuming the nuclear issue is resolved, what are some of the other issues here?
Well, let me first take issue a little bit with what the analyst said. Iran is not going to get immediate relief that is going to be worth a great deal. The U.S. government estimates that Iran will be getting about $7 billion in the coming 6 months that it otherwise would not have gotten. But it's still losing billions more every month because of economic sanctions that will remain in place. Iran is getting access to some of the money that it previously earned that has been stuck in banks in China and Japan, South Korea, Turkey, India. So it's modest sanctions relief. In terms of what else Iran gains, I think we have to wait and see what sort of role Iran wants to play in the region. Iran can be enormously helpful when it comes to Syria because of its relationship with the Assad government. We do not yet know what policies Iran is going to adopt. As of this moment, as we're talking, Iran still has not been invited to a Geneva conference on Syria. So we're waiting to see whether the Iranians will agree to a transitional government in Syria. There are a number of things where we could really work with them much more closely and constructively, but the nuclear agreement is the beginning of that.
All right, Barbara Slavin, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.